Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Mighty Mysteries on a Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, and I welcome you today to another wonderful interview with a dear, brilliant author who is also a dear friend. I'm Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 13 thrillers, including the newest one, Her Perfect Life, which has starred reviews from Kirkus and Publishers Weekly, but you know that. And what you need to know is that today we are interviewing the fabulous Nicole Baart, the author of the brand new Everything We Didn't Say, which I cannot wait for you to hear about. This is the most, I know it sounds strange to say, but this is the most lovingly written book I've ever read. It is dear and it is tender and it is thoughtful and it is heartbreaking and it is a suspenseful mystery that you will never figure out the twist after twist after twist. So don't even try. Just sit back and curl up and read this wonderful, wonderful story. And you may get your own copy, not this one because I'm keeping this, your very own copy of Everything We Didn't Say, because Nicole Baart has generously offered a giveaway today for you listeners here at Mighty Mysteries at A Mighty Blaze. And we are grateful for that. So you know the scoop, you know the rules on that. Just leave a comment or a question for Nicole while the show is on. So you've got about 40 minutes, and we will pick a winner of this wonderful book by the end of the show. The Blazers in the back room will pick a winner at random and they will post it, and we won't even know who it is until you do. So do leave a question or a comment for Nicole. And also, we do want you to ask questions too, and we will leave some time at the end of the interview for you to ask questions, and I know you will have them. So I want to welcome you all today. I see Lisa Barr, the fabulous Lisa Barr, is here today, and Bozena is here, and that's great, and Carla Suto. I love when you all come to these interviews, and this is a glorious one for you to have picked today. So welcome, Nicole Baart. You are in Iowa? You are in Iowa where was snowing.
Yeah, you can see right out the window there. Hi, Hank. It's so good to see you. We were just chatting. We haven't seen each other for a couple of years, but it's wonderful to see your face.
Thank you. We were talking about how the last time we saw each other was in Deadwood, South Dakota, which is just about as random as you can get, but it was a wonderful book festival where we got to see Mount Rushmore, and that was a real moment. So Nicole Baart, Mount Rushmore, equally wonderful, equally fabulous. And your book came out November 2nd, and it has been Book of the Month Club selection and also a book club selection for other book clubs too. How has that been?
Oh, it's been so much fun. It's been a whirlwind. Yeah, it was. I have my Book of the Month copy right here because it's hardcover. I don't know if you can see it. There you go.
That's so great.
Yeah, that came out in October, and that was so fun. October was really busy. They have an incredible community over there at Book of the Month, and everybody was just reaching out on Instagram and Facebook and email and connecting with so many readers. So it's been a whirlwind, but really, really fun.
That when I look over here, you all, I'm looking at the comments. I'm not turning away from Nicole, but I'm looking to see welcoming Phyllis and Sherry and all kinds of wonderful people here today. And Anissa, who is saying, hi, Lisa, and everyone is here to welcome you, Nicole. So just tell me, how did you hear that you were a Book of the Month Club selection? Who told you and how did that feel?
Okay, it's kind of a fun story. So I was at the pool with my kids. We have this really fantastic pool. It was August, towards the end of the summer, and the kids all wanted to go to the pool. So I took them, and I happened to be sitting on a lawn chair. I had just taken a little break from jumping off the diving boards and doing all the fun things. And I opened up my email, which I typically don't do when my kids are around, and I don't know why I was possessed to do it, but I did. And there was this email that said, Book of the Month across the front, and I started. It's crazy. I'm almost embarrassed, but I started jumping around. I was crying. I was so excited. And my kids thought that something terrible was wrong. So what happened? Did somebody get in an accident? I'm like, no, I'm happy. Yeah, it was really fun. A moment I'll never forget.
Oh, that's so wonderful. And now I'm envisioning you with the kids at the pool, everybody dripping wet and you jumping up and down. That's just great. That is quite a moment. Well, that is an incredible honor Congratulations on that. And I love to think about all the people who were introduced to you and this marvelous book as a result of that choice. Sometimes the universe works in mysterious and wonderful ways, and we rely on that. Quickly, for all of you who are joining us today, Sherry is saying she's in Iowa as well. So that's nice. Welcome to our Iowa readers and everyone else. Let me tell you a tiny bit for 2 seconds about A Mighty Blaze, if you don't know. A Mighty Blaze was started by the fabulous powerhouse team of Caroline Levitt and Jenna Blum, now on to 2 years ago at the very beginning of the pandemic, as a way to keep us all together and reading and talking about books and discovering new authors and new readers and new books, just like we are today with Everything We Didn't Say by Nicole Baart. And don't forget, there is a giveaway of that. And if I can have 10 more seconds for me to yammer, I will read you Nicole Baart's official bio. Nicole Baart is a New York Times best-selling author, collaborator, ghostwriter, and speaker. Her critically acclaimed novels have been featured in Southern Living, Country Woman, Bookpage, Glam, and Yahoo Lifestyle, among many, many others. And there's so much more to hear about Nicole and her marvelous family. And I do want to get into that as we go into this talk today. But Everything We Didn't Say, Nicole, is about love and loyalty and secrets. Set up the book a little bit for us, for those who haven't read it. I know Phyllis just put up that she has read it and loved it, and I know she wants to hear you talk about it as well.
So Everything We Didn't Say is the story of Juniper Baker. I'm sorry, did we?
I think you just froze a little bit, but you're fine now.
Okay, good. I'll start over. Everything We Didn't Say is the story of Juniper Baker. She's a 35-year-old special archives librarian from Denver, Colorado, and she returns to her tiny town in northwest Iowa, ostensibly to help an old friend who's struggling with a terminal illness. But really, she's there to solve a 15-year-old double homicide, and she hopes to win back the daughter she left behind. So there's kind of a lot going on.
Well, you know, there's sort of a lot going on, but really Juniper, such a great name, comes back to her family and to her hometown after having left under a bit of a cloud to sort of find her own life. And she comes back to this unsolved mystery, which has its tendrils around her family, and also to reclaim her daughter, Willa. And there are mysteries surrounding both of those stories. Where did you get the idea to combine a small town cold case with a very loving story of almost romance and mother-daughter relationships?
Well, my favorite stories are complex. We're multi-layered people, and I want my characters to be that way too. So I wanted the plot to be gripping and there to be something really exciting, but at the heart of it, this girl, adult woman, as a child when she was 19 years old, experienced an incredible trauma, and that leaves you changed. So I wanted to figure out how that impacted her, how it impacted her relationships, how it impacted where she went with her life and the choices that she made. And once you start pulling those threads, the story unravels on its own. So,
although unravels on its own is hardly a way to describe writing such a beautiful book as this. How did you decide on the nugget of the story, where Juniper's story would begin?
Yeah, that's a really difficult one for me. This book was so hard for me to write. I typically write a book in about a year. It takes me a year to conceptualize it, so I'm often writing another book while I'm thinking about the one that I'm gonna write next. But by the time I put pen to paper and it's done, it's usually about a year. But this book took me closer to 3. I wrote it, I rewrote it again, like from the ground up multiple times. So when I think back to that, like very original thread that got me excited and started on it, it all came back to a cold case in Iowa. I'm really interested in podcasts. I like listening to true crime podcasts particularly. And I was just curious to see what's going on in my own state, like how many unsolved mysteries are there here. So I was Googling and I came across a case that just gripped me, and I kind of couldn't let it go. And I ended up falling down a bit of a rabbit hole trying to figure out I'm not a detective. I didn't figure out what happened. But that's really where it began. I wanted to give I wanted to give a different ending to what could have been a really tragic story and what was a really tragic story.
I mean, one of the things about cold cases is that people are searching for why something happened and how it could have happened, and to have some sort of, I hate the word, but some sort of closure, or at least um, ending, some sort of an ending. And a book can provide some ending for it. It doesn't, when you look at a cold case and you're inspired by that, then your author brain can say, okay, what might have happened and why?
Oh, absolutely. You brought up a really interesting point. I think when I read a book that tells me the who and the when and the where and the what, like that's interesting, and I want to have a really good plot. But the question that always drives my books is why? Why would somebody do this? And I think that nugget of humanity inside all of us that we can sometimes even relate to the why, even if we would never do something like that ourselves. That's what grips me.
That's so interesting. That is so fascinating, because when I'm thinking about what you said about working 3 years on this book, sort of excavating the book and reweaving the book, to mix metaphors horribly, was that what you were doing, searching for why everyone did what they did?
Yes. And you know what? I had it wrong. In the first iteration of the book, I had a different villain, the person who did it. And it made sense. Like it all fit together. Everything clicked. And at the end of the day, I could have published that book and it would have made sense. But it didn't have the emotional impact and the depth that the current book does. I just needed to figure out the why. It took me a while to do it.
And that's what that's what a Nicole Baart book is. There is this core, this heart of emotion and motivation and passion. As I was saying as the interview began, that this book is written about with so much love and so much depth and so much exploration of how we as human beings connect with each other, and why we want what we want, and how far we'll go to get that, and how people can get hurt along the way, and how we rationalize that, how we juggle what we do. And that's clear on every page. How do you think about that? I know this is a difficult question, but how do you think about that as a writer, each individual person woven together in the whole?
Well, I don't know if you do Enneagram or if you know anything about that or if your audience does, but I'm an Enneagram 2. I'm a helper. I'm an empath. I find it really interesting, like when I watch a movie with friends or a TV show or something, and they'll go, oh, I hate that guy. I hope he goes to jail. I can't stand him. And I'm going, oh, but he was hurt as a child and my heart is broken for him. And I understand why he does the things he does, even though they're wrong. So I think that really plays into my understanding of characters. I genuinely love people and love to figure out what makes them tick. And it's really hard for me not to put that into my books. So I'll even have people write me after the fact and say, oh, I hated that character. You were too nice to him. I can't help it.
No, and so, I write murder mysteries as well, and it's very difficult for me to kill the person in the mystery. And I'll say, I've come out and said to my husband, do I have to kill them? Maybe I could just make them be hurt really badly, and then they go to the hospital, and then they repent, and then they get better, and then everything is fine. And yes. Jonathan says, you don't write go to the hospital and get better mysteries, honey. You write murder mysteries.
Yeah. So sounds like you might be a 2 also. It sounds like you might be an Enneagram 2 also.
Well, I wonder about that. I'll have to look that up. I will have to look at I think I have done this, and I'm not sure I'm a 2. I think I might be a 7, which is not that good. But we'll look it up later. Do you all know about Enneagrams? We can talk. Oh, good. Thank you. Margaret is putting up how to get to an Enneagram. Don't do it right now, you all. But when the review is over, go find out what number you are. The setting, this town in Jericho, Iowa, is so emblematic of so many things in the book. This small town setting. Talk a little bit about how you know about that. And why you chose it to be in that sort of a bubble of a place.
Yeah. So I grew up in a small town. When I was a kid, there were probably 5,000 people in our town, which is pretty close to Jericho, the small town and everything we didn't say. And I moved away, went to Vancouver, British Columbia, lived in a city. And now we're back. We're back to the same place where I started, which I never imagined we would do. And yet it's so good, and it's just where our family is supposed to be. And I find it fascinating to explore this, this small area in middle America that is often overlooked and forgotten. And people can imagine horrible things happening in some, back alley in New York City, or, some ghetto in a terrible place. But middle America is this, quaint apple pie and baseball and, front porch, swinging on your front porch with a cup of coffee. And that's true. There's beautiful things about it, but boy, there are secrets and betrayals and horrible things that happen in places like this too. I just think that we gloss it over a little bit. So it's fun for me to take a look at this context and the people who are here and mine the depths of what that could possibly be.
And here's Heather Webb saying hi. Hey, dear Heather, how are you? So nice to see all of our pals here today. But one of the things that when you have this beautiful small town, let me read a little bit to you all about one of the ways that Nicole describes Jericho on the 4th of July, with no spoilers. Nearly every farm and every house we enter on the outskirts of town is decorated with stars and stripes. Flags hang from poles and porches, red gingham tablecloths cover picnic tables, and kids are dressed in red, white, and blue. It's a slice of Americana straight from a Hollywood movie, but there's an earnestness to our celebration that defies cliche. We aren't trying to be this way. We just are. And that really brought tears to my eyes because, well, for so many reasons that you all can figure out, but that shows such a connection and such an understanding of a certain kind of community. Where does that come from in a small town?
Yeah. Everybody knows each other, and to a certain extent that can be really frustrating. People feel like they live in a fishbowl. People will see me that I'll be at the grocery store or something, and people who don't even know me that well, they know that I have a little free library outside in front of my house. And I'll say, come to the little free library. I just put, a fabulous book in there. You're going to love it. And then I'll start to give them my address, and they'll say, oh, but I know where you live. I'm going, how do you know where I live? But it's because my boys play hockey on my driveway nearly every single day. And my family is rather distinct. So people drive by and see us playing in the driveway, and they know that that's where I am. So there's this interconnectedness, I think, between people, that they go to church together, they go to school together, they see each other at the grocery store. And, there are times that I think everybody, I don't know, feels stifled by that, maybe suffocated, but there's also something incredibly beautiful about it. My house was smoking several years ago. I came home from an event and I could see smoke coming out of my attic. And within like half an hour, we had the the fire department and the police. Everybody was here. My attic was on fire. But my neighbors from all over could see it happening and were at our house and like, let me take your kids. Can I put them somewhere safe? What do you guys need? Do you need a place to stay? Do you need something to eat or to drink? And that sense of community and togetherness is really profound and really beautiful. And I like writing about that.
And Carla's saying, I love the small town vibe, but the vibe in a small town, depending on what someone wants and whether you're a have or a have not, or an in or an out, or whether you want the same thing as someone else does, as happens so often and in such parallel in everything we didn't say, those conflicts are in this crucible now where it's difficult to get away and difficult to escape it and difficult to hide it.
Yeah. I think that's very, very true. And thankfully, there hasn't been a murder in my hometown anytime, that at least as long as I know. But it sure is fun to stick one in here and see what happens.
Well, because of the conflict that arises from even just commerce of the land that is so important in a small farming town like that, and the preservation of the land and the destruction of the land and the way farming has changed. You had to, that's a tiny bit of the story, but that is part of the center of the conflict. And is that something that is in everybody's consciousness in the Midwest now?
Yeah, I think it really is. Like, I live in a town, but we're considered rural. I mean, farming and what's happening just outside of our city limits is such a huge part of our community and who we are. And it's interesting to see that evolve, because I remember being a kid and nobody thought about that kind of stuff. And now everybody is. Like, our world is changing and we're seeing our environment change, and we desperately want to find ways to preserve it and to, yeah, have a beautiful world ready for our children and grandchildren someday. So I can't say that I'm all that educated on it, but I sure am enjoying absorbing the information and trying to learn as much as I can.
Well, I love how you open the door to readers in thinking about that the sort of the importance of farming and the importance of how the middle of the country serves the entire country, and how best to do that, and how much money is potentially involved. I mean, in a small town, there's always the family that you focus on. For instance, in this book, there's always the family that has more money, more power, more land. And that unbalance is so prevalent in this book. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Oh, that's a hard one. And I think that we can all relate to that. Like, even back to your own high school experiences, no matter where you grew up, there was a hierarchy. There were the haves and have-nots, and the in kids and the out kids. And I spent my high school experience very much as an out kid. At least I would have considered myself on the periphery. I was a reader, and I was not involved in sports, and a bit of a nerd, I guess. And I can't say that I held that against anybody, but at the same time, it's so interesting for me to look at those power dynamics and why we have this need to exert our authority and our superiority over other people. And even as I hate it and see it in other people, I can turn around, look in the mirror, and find myself doing it in certain situations. And it's just really fascinating to me. I don't know why we do that. And I tell my kids every single day when they get out of the car on their way to school, I say, I love you, have a wonderful day, be kind. And the last 2 words that they hear from me are be kind. Why is that such a hard thing to do? I'm myself included. I'm not, putting this on anybody else. I think we all have a really hard time. Being that person that is tender and open and soft to other people.
And aware of other people and aware of other people's feelings, that kind of juggle. And it's difficult in high school. That's why that's why high school is such a difficult time. I grew up in really rural Indiana, so rural that you couldn't see another house from our house. So I can't begin to tell you how many of my pals in writer world were sort of outcasts in high school. That's probably an interview for another time. But when you introduce love when for teenagers who are 19, 18, that kind of thing, there's a special sort of sweetness about it, and there's a special sort of longing about it, and there's a special sort of impossibility about it. So into this small town, and there are 2 parts of the book, before and now. You introduce into the before part this sort of teenage, sweet, secret relationship. Talk a little bit about that and how that was to write.
Yeah, I loved doing that. I never intended to give half of the book to Juniper as a 19-year-old.
Oh.
The entire book started Juniper at 35 and her looking back over her life. And the more I wrote, the more I realized I want to know what she was like when she was 19. And she's 18 at the very beginning of the book, and she has her birthday, she turns 19. And that was just so fascinating to me and so much fun to revisit that and think about those times. Like, I'm not 19 anymore, but I sure do feel that way sometimes. Do you know what I mean? Like that, I feel like I could be 19 or 24 or 30 or whatever. And it was just a joy to go back and remember that time when the world just feels like it's unfurling before you. And yeah, Juniper, or June, she was called at that time, just had the world by the tail and everything, there for her. So that was just so fun to write.
And the relationships, the sort of interlocking relationships in the book, are so gorgeously done. And it's what a brilliant idea to go back and have us see people at a younger age, Juniper and her brother and her friends and the other people in the town, and how everyone's relationships were before, and now how the puzzle pieces rearrange themselves. So the picture of the town is completely different right now. Did those relationships change as you refigured out the book?
They did. I really wanted Juniper and her brother Jonathan to be central to the story, and I loved the fact that the 2 of them grew up virtual twins. I have one brother. He's a couple years younger than me, and we had the opposite thing. We weren't necessarily that close when we were younger, but we became close as we got older. So to take that dynamic and shift it just a little bit and imagine the relationship that they had, that's probably the one that underwent the biggest change as I was writing.
And I love the title as well. Remember, we're giving away a copy of Everything We Didn't Say. I cannot say that enough. We're giving away a copy of Everything We Didn't Say, and you have about 15 more minutes to leave a comment or a question for Nicole. This title is so evocative because it is about keeping secrets, and it is about wanting to say something to someone. It's about things that we shouldn't say and things that we should say. And things that if we had only said out loud or could figure out a way to say would have changed everything. And sometimes that's only understandable in hindsight. Talk about the evolution of that title.
You know, I'm terrible at titles and I didn't pick it, my editor did, but I struggled with the title at first because one of my pet peeves is when I'm reading a book and I'm like, okay, this whole book hinges on the fact that she didn't tell him this one thing. Like if she would have just opened her mouth and said this thing, this whole book would have been done. So when we came up with the idea of Everything We Didn't Say, I was like, well, I don't want it to be one of those books because I think there's a lot more depth to it. And I don't think that that's necessarily true, that this could have all been solved by, you know, a couple people saying a couple of things. But I do think that there are instances where we hold back what we should say because we're so afraid of what it's going to mean and who it's going to hurt and how it's going to impact our lives. And yeah, I'm not a fan of miscommunication tropes, but I think that this works in this instance. And I hope that it makes readers think about the things that they should say but can't, and maybe just consider what needs to be said.
Well, the other thing about not saying something is sometimes it's a secret. Sometimes the goal is to keep something secret, not that if only someone had asked, and I agree with you, but it's that there are things that we feel that are protecting ourselves or protecting someone else. And so, of course, you're not going to say it. The relationship between Juniper and her daughter is such a great example of that, of the struggle for a relationship. And talk a little bit about mother-daughter relationships. And you're so great at that. Your books are so wonderful about that. Outlining that.
I am a mom. I have 5 kids. They range in age from 11 to 19. And I have one daughter in the middle of all of that. She's 14 and she is just the joy of my life. I love her so much. And yet mother-daughter relationships are really hard. Like, I have a fantastic relationship with my own mom, and yet there are things that we struggle with. And I love exploring that and exploring how you can just have so much affection for and so much deep love and empathy and concern for this person, and yet do things wrong. Like, we screw up, right? And Juniper wants this relationship with her daughter, and yet she doesn't know how to do it, and she hasn't had the best model. And it's been interesting to interact with readers because some of them feel like, I hated that relationship, and I hated the fact that she, abandoned her daughter. But to me, it wasn't so much abandonment as it was exile. And when she was exiled, when she was pushed out of her life, now she's trying to find her way back. So.
And there's some scenes between Willa and Juniper that are just so great. The scenes of when they're talking past each other, and then there'll be a moment where they just connect, and you see that little sort of kiss of the universe, letting us know as readers that they will be okay. They just have to learn to say the things that they didn't say or hadn't practiced saying. Let me go back to the small townness, because I should have asked you. There are parts of this book that I think, how did she know that? How do you know about gathering eggs? And how do you know about making jam? And how do you know about what cows do? And how do you know about the crops and all those kinds of things? Those farm situations are written so gorgeously naturally.
Oh, thank you. It is natural. So I grew up with my grandparents on a farm, a 160-acre farm. So we spent a lot of time gathering the eggs, and I worked on a dairy when I was older. I wanted to be a a vet. I was going to be a big animal veterinarian. So I spent a couple of years working on a dairy and taking care of all the calves, and yeah, that was my job. So I'd get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I'd milk cows, and I wouldn't get home until about 7 o'clock at night. I threw hay bales. I did all the things. So, and in my perfect world, I would have an acreage with all the things that I mentioned in the book. Like, that's kind of my dream.
Well, what is it that you loved about that? What is it that connected you to that part of the world?
Yeah, I love being outside and I love being in the earth. Gardening is a big part of my life. I live in town. You can kind of see it behind me maybe a bit, but I'm surrounded by trees, so I don't get enough sunlight for a vegetable garden, but I have flowers all over my yard, and that's my favorite part of the summertime, is getting my fingers dirty in the soil. And I don't know, I love being, this might sound a little frou-frou, but I love being connected to the earth. The days and the nights and the rhythms, and we are a part of this planet, and I love digging into that, literally and figuratively.
And when you all read this book, you will see, and I could read you forever, the gorgeous descriptions that Nicole writes about the land and connections with the land and other people's connections and love for the land. And also what can happen. Bozania is saying lots of love from another gardener. Yes, me too. The connections that we have with the land and with the universe, and why that is important. You were saying that but I'll let you all find that out. I'll let you all find that out for yourself. Did you know the end of the book before you started?
No, I didn't. I thought I had it all figured out, and then I started writing and everything changed. But then I don't like to tie my books up so neatly with a bow that people walk away knowing everything. I want you to be thinking about the book as you leave, and I want to leave it a little bit choose your own adventure, because by the time you get to the end, there are people who want this and others who want that, and I love to hint at what might come and then kind of leave it open to interpretation. So I wrote the end, oh boy, 2.5 years after I started the book, and it was kind of fun to put that final bow on it when I knew it was finally done.
You know, when I get to the end of a book for the final time, when I know it's right, sometimes I actually start crying, because sometimes it feels like, oh, this is right. How did you feel after all that work and
Yeah.
all that love and passion and determination and skill? I mean, because that's skill that you put into this book, knowing that you had come up with this gorgeous, understandable, believable, realistic story.
Hank, you're so kind. Thank you so much. This book, people ask me all the time, like, you have a lot of books, which one is your favorite? And I think this one is going to have to be it, because it was written during a very difficult time in my life. I wrote in a fog. I wasn't really even aware sometimes really of what I was doing. And then a global pandemic hit, and I had to rewrite it in the midst of a pandemic. And it was so hard to sit at my kitchen table with my 5 children around me, all doing school. So I was doing a science experiment with one and helping another with algebra, which I can't do. I'm terrible at math.
Whatever.
And here I was sitting with my notebook and pen and my paper and trying to write a book. And I think that entire experience is just woven into the pages of this book. And I don't know that I'll ever be able to pick it up and not think about this time in my life and have it really hit me, where this all came from, and the grief and the hurt and the hardness that it was born out of.
I mean, it is interesting to think that something so beautiful can come out of something that's so terrible.
Oh, for sure.
And I know that a lot of people who are watching today do know about you and your family. Can you just tell us briefly about your wonderful life?
Yeah. So I do have 5 kids. They're from quite literally all over the world. We have 7 people in our family, obviously my husband and I and our 5 kids, and none of us have none of our citizenships match up. We are all dual citizens, and we are all different combinations of dual citizens. So yeah, my husband is Canadian. We lived in Vancouver, British Columbia for several years. And we also have a nonprofit organization in Liberia, West Africa, which is completely a second home to me and my family. And we're heartbroken that we haven't been able to be back to either of those places since COVID started, but hopefully hopefully soon, hopefully this spring and summer, the world will open up again.
Is it fun for you? Do you remember what books you read as a kid? And is it fun for you to introduce your children to reading?
Yes, absolutely. They're not as interested in the books that I read when I was a kid. I probably read above my pay grade when I was little. I loved like Lucy Maud Montgomery, and I read Dickens when I was a little girl. I was a bit unique that way. But to my children, I love to read. We've read all the Harry Potter books. When they're about 8 years old, that's when we start the Harry Potter series and we work all the way through. They love The One and Only Ivan. We've done that one together. A Wrinkle in Time. That's just such a fun book to read out loud because it's beautiful and it's exciting, but there's this like sense of impending doom on all the pages of that book, which is perfect to curl up with and read.
And it also lets kids know that it's okay to be smart. It's okay to be the smart one. It's okay to be afraid, that you can be determined, that you have some power as an individual person. And there are more things in the world that we have than we have ever even imagined. Yes, I think that's a favorite book of so many people. I want to make sure that you all get some time to ask some questions. So let's look and see whether there are any questions from the audience. We can be sure to get some of those. You said you were, I hate to ask you this, but I'm tempted because you mentioned it earlier that you were working on something else. Are you going to be able to have a little bit of holiday celebration time to sort of pat yourself on the back and reward yourself for such a job well done?
My kids are out of school on Friday. Their last day is Fridays. And then we have 2 full weeks off. And we're just going to have so much fun. We're going to a Vikings game in Minneapolis, and we're going to make cookies and watch movies and play in the snow, I guess. So yeah, we're going to take a break. It'll be good.
That's wonderful. I mean, writing is your full-time job though, is that correct?
Yeah, kind of. No, it is what I do. Writing is what I do, but I never imagined that 5 kids could be as busy as they are. They're all in school.
No.
They're really my full-time job. It is unbelievable. The orthodontist appointments, the orthopedic appointments, it's just never ending. Somebody's always sick or needs, I don't know, cookies for a youth event or whatever.
No, I'm joking because I'm in complete awe of you. Sometimes when I'm sitting here with just my husband and me, and I'm griping about how much work I have to do, and then I think about Nicole Baart. Now, just get back to work. So, are you loving this? Are you loving the writing? Do you feel that you're growing as a person as you're writing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love writing. It's my heart, it's my passion. And I hope that I'm writing when I'm 85 years old. I hope that every book I write is better than the last and that I learn something from it every time. And that really is what I try to do. So in between books, I always pick up craft books and start the process over again. Like I'm constantly trying to learn something or teach myself something. So yeah.
Burma, that's I do that too, and it's wonderful when you begin to realize that you're writing a little bit differently. You're not doing something that you had done in the past, but you learned not to do it. This sort of evolution of self-editing. That's really rewarding when you see yourself learning. The fabulous Burma is asking a wonderful name, and you do have some fabulous ones in this book. How do you come up with the characters' names?
Oh. Okay, I have a great story with this book. So when I was in college, I had a whirlwind romance with a guy. I was working at the farm that summer, and he was working in Yellowstone National Park. I think he was a ranger, but he took a backpack. He didn't sleep in a cabin or anything. He would take his backpack, and all throughout the week, he would walk through Yellowstone. I'm not really even sure what he was doing, but he sent me letters. Like, this was a long time ago, back before phones were ubiquitous. And every week I would receive a letter from him, handwritten from somewhere in Yellowstone. And he always enclosed something in it. So a pressed flower or a leaf that he found interesting. And one time I opened up the envelope and it was a sprig of juniper. And the scent of it was just so evocative, and I don't know, it was just this really beautiful experience. And I remember thinking to myself when I was like 18, 19 years old, I would like to write a book someday about a woman named Juniper. And now. Many years later, I'll let you do the math. It happened. So that's where her name came from. And as for the rest of them, I don't know. I don't know if you feel this way, Hank, but my characters' names just click. Like I know that I need a middle-aged man or whatever, and I might look at different lists of names, but there comes a point where that one name, it's just it. And I don't know how to describe it other than you just know.
It's really interesting because I think there's some writer magic brain thing that happens, because if you've given someone the wrong name, they won't work. They don't come to life. They aren't who they are. And the minute you discover, or they tell you what their name really is, they sit up straight and they have an attitude and they have posture and they have intent. And it's just really quite lovely and quite magic. And it doesn't work until it works, and you can't make it work. It just sometimes works. I so agree. The fabulous Anissa is saying, oh, the question of all questions, do you lead your characters or do they lead you?
Oh, that's a great question. I have really good ideas. So I start out leading my characters. I like to do an outline. I do a pretty extensive outline. I'm not a pantser. I was at one point in time, but I'm not anymore. But yeah, I have really good ideas of what should happen in their lives. And then I start writing and they take over. They're so bossy. I don't know why they do that, but I typically let them do what they think they need to. I think it leads me in good places when the characters come alive that much that they start talking back.
I love it. And I love to be surprised. And I think you did that. You had that. You said that. That was your reaction. And I think that means you're really in the zone of writing. That means the story is correct when they do have that intent. We are out of time. It is so crazy. I can't believe the time has gone by. Excuse me, so quickly. You are such a joy. Congratulations on the wild success of everything we didn't say. Are you happy with the book clubs and the adulation and the marvelous reviews?
It is so fun, and it's so fun to connect with readers. My favorite part has been watching messages come in and have people say, I stayed up last night reading it or whatever, and I just want to sit down and talk with them and say, what did you think about this? Or how did that character impact you? So it's been so good.
Well, it's a life-changing book, and it will make everyone who reads it, including me, look at the world in a different way. And I do have it hovering in my brain now. Be kind, as you always say. And that's such a major point of this book. And the winner is Carla Suto. That's marvelous, Carla. Congratulations. You are such a lucky reader and such a wonderful fan of Mighty Mysteries. Thank you so much for being here so often. And we will send that book to you right away. Again, thank you so much, Nicole. Best of luck and much, much joy over the holidays and for the rest of your life and career. I know you'll be back. I know you'll be back for your next book.
Thank you. It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And speaking of next book, next week on Tuesday at 4, something completely different. Ted Bell's Seahawk. So look what this is about. Spies and boats. Excuse me. And it's time to go because I'm losing my voice. So join us next Tuesday on the Mighty Mysteries. We'll see you then.